The effects of wildfires in Hawaii have put a magnifying glass on a systemic issue that has plagued the land of Hawaii for decades. And it really underscores exploitative tourism. And it is the reason why Hawaii is literally bleeding out and dying. The only way that I can even begin to describe what's occurring is pretty much a term that I've coined, which is neo-colonial leisure exploitation. And it's essentially how tourists are still coming to the land in a colonialistic way to enjoy themselves while they are actively ignoring the suffering of the land and its people. I want to explain a little bit about what this term is and the phenomenon that I have consistently observed that led me to create this term and to coin it. And in order to do so, I will give a background on what is happening in Maui. So the wildfires in Maui, Hawaii, serve as a grim reminder of the ongoing neo-colonial leisure exploitation, which is plaguing the region. So I'm going to break down this term and what led me to coin it as neo-colonial leisure exploitation. And it's essentially a practice that has been plaguing Hawaii for so many years. And it's a form of exploitation that is a direct consequence of tourist practices and the lingering effects of US imperialism, like most things. This form of tourism systemically undermines the ecological and cultural integrity of Hawaii, with tourists playing a central role in the destructive dynamic. Now, before we get into what's happening in modern times with the wildfires, I want to start historically, right? So Hawaii's annexation in 1959 marked the beginning of a new phase of US imperialism, one that transformed the island, into a tourist haven. And this transformation has not been benign. It has fostered an environment where tourists, driven by imperialist narratives and entitlement, engage in activities that erode the local culture, environment, and land. Now, fast forward to the recent 2023 wildfires in Maui, especially the loss of Lahaina and the historic banyan tree. And apologies if I mispronounce those pronunciations. The destruction that we're seeing of these culturally important places are not just natural disasters, but they are cultural tragedies. And the response of tourists to these events could not be more disgusting. I'm just gonna start. Many tourists have been continuing their leisure activities unabated, despite Hawaii literally burning, bleeding out, and years of cultural archives being burned down. Tourists have continued their everyday leisure activities completely unabated, next to the very smoke and ashes of a people and their heritage. This type of ecosystem and phenomenon reflects a disturbing apathy towards the local crisis and exacerbates the long-standing issues of cultural erosion and environmental degradation. Now, the issue at hand is not necessarily Maui's reliance on tourism, but rather the behaviors and the attitudes of tourists themselves. These visitors, often insulated from the realities of the local community, contribute to a cycle of harm, and their demands for leisure and luxury take precedence over anything. And their demands for leisure and luxury and a way to escape their 9-to-5s takes precedence over anything, including the well-being of the land and its people. That is just a clear example of white supremacy and its linkage and ties into the tourist system. And ultimately, it really just perpetuates a system that marginalizes and exploits Native Hawaiians. This relentless pursuit of leisure by any means is a modern form of colonialism where economic and cultural dominance manifests in the form of environmental harm and cultural insensitivity. The wildfires have really magnified the deep scars left by tourists' indifference and imperialist legacies. So when we think about how we can solve this, addressing this issue really does require more than just economic adjustments. It really demands a fundamental shift in how tourism is perceived and practiced. And there are really great people doing the work against this. Initiatives like the Hawaii Land Trust are crucial, yet the change must also come from the tourists themselves and the broader structures that enable such exploitation. A reevaluation of tourist practices and attitudes is imperative, and the path forward should focus on respecting and preserving Hawaii's unique cultural and environmental heritage and prioritizing the rights and needs of the native population over just the short-term pleasure of tourists. As I mentioned, the 2023 wildfires that were fueled by Hurricane Dora and worsened by severe drought tore through Maui, and the fires decimated vital ecosystems and cultural sites. Destruction was not just environmental, but it was a cultural loss for Native Hawaiians. Tourism in Hawaii, a sector rooted in colonialist practices, has transformed into a mechanism that often exploits the land and its people. Since Hawaii's statehood in 1959, the tourism industry has surged, driving up housing prices and displacing Native populations. This gentrification, a product of colonial history, has left lasting impacts on Native Hawaiian communities. Post-fire, as the ruins still smoldered, hotels became refugees for those displaced, while tourists continued to arrive, completely ignoring the plight of what has just occurred. I think that this situation underscores the long-standing disregard for Native Hawaiian experiences and for Native Hawaiian life. The wildfires really have magnified the exploitative nature of Hawaii's tourist industry and impacts on the indigenous communities. So it really goes without saying that it's time for a change. It's been time for a change. And the exploitative tourism being shown, driven by colonialist practices, must be stopped. We're seeing really great initiatives like the Hawaii Land Trust stepping up and focusing on community engagement and land reclamation and conservation, which is amazing. And these efforts represent a move towards sustainable development that prioritizes the needs of Native populations over just transient tourist interests. If you're watching this, it requires more than just the people of Hawaii doing the work. The tourists and the outside people need to stop these practices. And as Hawaii navigates the aftermath of the fires, we must recognize the harmful impacts of tourism and really work towards a future that respects and revitalizes indigenous culture and history. So I stand and we stand with Hawaii advocating for a future where Native communities are prioritized and their rights to the land and self-determination are respected. So if you're watching this and thinking about a trip to Hawaii, please don't go. Please donate and please help the people through monetary donations and by respecting their land, their boundaries, and the island. Thank you.